We're continuing our talk about the big races for 2010 governor and the U.S. Senate. Chris, which Republicans do you think will want to challenge Dodd?
Well, we do have a pretty good bench. We've got former Congressman Rob Simmons, who would be an excellent candidate. Obviously, he's represented half the landmass of the state for 6 years, been active as a business advocate. Kevin O'Connor, just returning as #3 man at the Justice Department. Ran against John Larson, one of the best campaigns ever in the 1st Congressional District. He's coming back to a private law practice. I think he'll be visible. Tom Foley was ambassador to Ireland for the last 4 years from Greenwich. And I think one of the state senators could emerge, someone like Sam Caligiuri, for example. Has a lot to offer, been a mayor of, when he was mayor of Waterbury, did a very good job at a time of great uncertainty and scandal. Those are just 4 right off the bat. Chris Shays as well. So we have a lot of people that could be, emerge, either that have credentials to go to Washington immediately and actually do a much better job than Chris Dodd, I believe, and also can raise the money that's needed to run a really effective winning campaign.
One of the blogs was saying that, speculating perhaps Governor Rell would run for that because she's the most popular Republican. Do you ever see that? Running against Dodd?
My guess is that Governor Rell will probably run for re-election of governor. I think that's where her heart is, that's where her love is, and I think that's what she enjoys most. The other guy I forgot to mention was Jack Orchuli, who ran in 2004 as well. He's another potential candidate.
And he did really well last time.
Well, I mean, look, people lose all the time and they come back and win. John Larson lost for governor, became a congressman. John Rowland lost the first time, became governor. Lowell Weicker unfortunately lost. Well, actually, fortunately lost, but then he came back to haunt us as governor. So, losses and defeats are temporary in politics. Not everyone gets to run the table.
But if there is, if you get the right candidate, this could be a tight race because Dodd is now below 50% in an approval rating, which any political analyst or polls will tell you that's a danger zone.
Well, ask Brian. I mean, in politics, you're more likely to get either clipped at the beginning of your career or at the end of your career. That's when you're most vulnerable. And I think Dodd's record over the last 3 years has made voters question whether or not he's really our senator anymore. And that's not just me wishing it. You look at the polls and they say he's under 50% in approval and he's under 45% in re-elect.
Chris, Brian, who do you think is the best Republican to run against Dodd?
I think any of the guys that Chris talked about. I think the first out of the chute would probably be Rob Simmons. I think, as he said, he served well in Congress. He had half the state. And in the most Democratic district held by a Republican, came back several times until the tsunami a couple of years ago. So I think Rob Simmons looks at it. First, he's known around the state. So and I think
I disagree that he's known around the state, but go ahead.
No, I believe he is. I think I do also agree that I think Governor Rell takes a look at running again. I think she will, which I think means probably Mike Fedeli runs with her as lieutenant governor. But if he decided, he could take a look at it. And Kevin O'Connor. Kevin has a big run in him for pretty much whatever he chooses to do.
Would he do it now, though? Or would he wait,
Get him on the show now that he's coming back to Washington.
That's right.
Get on Face the State.
He is in an upcoming program, we will tell you that.
Yeah.
All right.
Doobie, which Republican would Democrats fear the most to run against Dodd? I mean, he's going to face a tough race this year. This is not an ordinary cakewalk like he's had in the past.
I mean, I agree. I think it's, it could be a tough race for Dodd. I agree. I mean, also you have, it will be a mid-year election. We all, I think, hope that President Obama does a great job, and I think he will. But that year can sometimes be a tough one. And I'm not just saying this because I know it's annoying when people don't answer the question. I don't think any of those names make Democrats nervous, with all due respect.
Good.
Because I don't think, that the Republicans have much of a bench, and that's not anybody's fault. But
there's a lot of outrage among those independent voters. I mean, you and I, do we live in the same neighborhood? A lot of liberal Democrats, and many of them have lost a lot of money in this financial crisis. They are upset. They are upset at what's been going on, and they're taking out their anger against President Bush and Chris Dodd. I mean,
most people don't have huge portfolios and they lose 30-40%. Most people have smaller IRAs and smaller investments, and when you lose that much, it means a lot. Also, most people's primary investment is their home. And for people that are either losing equity or in what they call underwater trying to pay off their mortgage, or they've lost their home, and look at what Chris Dodd has in terms of his mortgages. Now, whether he's done anything wrong or not, I give him the benefit of the doubt. But the more he holds on to this information, which is very rudimentary, does not need to be, it doesn't have to be blessed by the Senate Ethics Committee. There's no law that says he can't give that stuff out.
By the time we get into a campaign Everything's going to be on the table. The Senate ethics investigation will be over, and we'll know what the situation was.
But it would seem that you'd want all that out earlier. Had he dumped it, as I said, on Christmas Eve, it'd be out there, would go through it, the reporters would report it.
House Democrats were working on Jim Amon that night. So.
Now, Chris, you said in this program you wanted a Republican in line to run against Dodd by March. You still holding to that?
Well, I think anyone that's running for statewide office, for U.S. Senate, for Congress, for even constitutional officers, on our side at least, I think it's important that they make that decision. They get the family to buy in. They begin to assemble their team, and they map out how they're going to do it no later than March 1st. Whether they have a formal announcement really is beside the point. But you need to get started early to qualify if you're a state candidate for the matching funds, but more importantly for Congress, U.S. Senate, because the Democrats have a tremendous ability to raise money as incumbent members of Congress, and that regardless of who's in charge. But that's a huge advantage you got to get ahead of.
Every cycle, the national parties will target people in various states who they believe can be knocked off. Do you think the National Republican Party will invest some money in trying to defeat Chris Dodd?
I think they have to take a look at anyone who's vulnerable. I think they could also maybe take a look at Jim Himes, brand new guy down in Fairfield County. Chris said, for a Republican, it can be a little tougher in a statewide race. This is a Democratic state by registration. It's independent, though, in spirit, and the voters are paying attention. They're getting those 401ks back. They have more means to pay attention now. They watch Face the State. They're on the blogs. And I think when they sit down at the kitchen table and take a look at, boy, it's getting tougher and tougher all around.
Who do we punish?
Who do we, right, and what are our people, what are they doing for us in Hartford? What is that supermajority running the state legislature? What are they doing about it? And should we maybe take a harder look at just about anybody who's knocking on our door who wants to be interviewed to have our vote for office?
Chris, will you ask the National Party for money this time?
I always ask the National Party for money.
How's that going so far?
Well, look, we're out of power, and there are going to be challenges for us to raise money all across the board, but I think we're going to do fine. Nothing rallies Republicans more than Democrats going wild. And I think that's what's going to happen with the Obama administration, the spending that we anticipate, where the money is going. And at some point, this is going to become Barack Obama's economy. They're going to blame George Bush as long as they can, and fair enough. We blamed Jimmy Carter for a long time, but eventually that economy in 1980, 81, 82 became Ronald Reagan's economy. So we have to be positioned not just to be against Barack Obama or against Chris Dodd, but what we're for. And I think one of the reasons we were punished in the last two cycles was we weren't living up to our principles. I think our principles are fine about smaller government, freedom, independent living, all that stuff. Once we get back out there and talking directly to people through the various means that we do that now, laterally rather than from the top down.
Dennis, I think we do have to remember that one more thing about Senator Dodd is that when we do get into the heart of a re-election campaign, and people in this state who have re-elected him many times are reminded of the very tangible things he has done for this state, and larger things such as Family and Medical Leave Act, and work on health care that he will be, handling a lot of with Senator Kennedy being so ill. I mean, right now we're not in the middle of a campaign, so people aren't being reminded of all that. It's not right in front of them. A lot of negative stuff is about Chris Dodd, and then I think that will be very important and very much in his favor.
More with Brian, Doobie, and Chris when we come back to talk about the governor's race, and we have a surprise for all of you when we come back.
Oh boy.
You're going to validate our parking?